We are honored this evening to have a speaker who we didn't have a chance to make a commitment from, to receive a commitment from before the event, and so I couldn't in all conscience advertise it, but I am delighted to say that Ralph Nader has agreed to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Phil. Phil is really a master MC. I mean, he could really go places on that one. It's nice to be here in Alaska during the hot summer of 2007. When I was a law student, I took a better part of a summer off to go down to Washington and help get the Alaska statehood bill through. So I go back a long way with your state. And as a member of Veterans for Peace, I want to applaud a different kind of courage. These veterans had physical courage in the battlefield, World War II and other wars. But moral courage is much more difficult. Moral courage receives a kind of opposition that is very powerful and subtle, year after year after year. And that's why you see far more physical courage among veterans than there is moral courage. And they've really set the standard, because they're asking the question, what are we fighting for? What are we sacrificing for? And in the Iraq invasion, the answer is to support a criminal gang that has hijacked the U.S. government in the White House. What they have done, if the criminal laws could ever reach them, which they cannot, because the president and vice president are doing things above the law, outside the law. We have a great deficiency here we have to correct in the future. If they were in the criminal law, if they were in criminal courts, they'd be indicted and convicted. They violated the basic trust and spirit of the American people by plunging us in a war into Iraq that was unconstitutional, that was illegal under our statutes and under treaties that we belonged to, and that was based on a platform of lies, deceptions, cover-ups, again and again, day after day, week after week, year after year. The Iraq invasion and occupation is now longer than World War II. It is longer than the Civil War, and it has cost Americans in dollars more than any other war in our history except World War II. It just crossed the curve on the Vietnam War. It has cost over 700,000 lives in a country that never threatened us, devastated that country to a point where a majority of the Iraqi people would rather have the brutal dictatorship Saddam back, who at least gave them security in the streets and electricity and drinking water. That's how bad. Can you imagine Saddam Hussein being a hard act to follow for George W. Bush? And we must remember, it was our policy that supported Saddam invading Iran. It was our policy that put him in power. It was our policy that gave him weapons. It was our corporations under Department of Commerce license, under Reagan, that actually sent him the materials from which he made his chemical and biological warfare stores. See the illegality? They're using, these politicians in the White House are endangering our country. There never was any Al-Qaeda in Iraq until the invasion. General Casey and the head of the CIA, Porter Goss, Bush's own appointee, have stated, along with many others, that our military presence in Iraq is attracting more and more young men from more and more countries to be trained in sabotage and terrorism. We are doing exactly what your new legislator just said to you in one sentence. We are endangering our country. We are expanding the core of terror and sabotage, and we're doing it with American lives, 3,601 now, with tens of thousands of injuries, far more than the Bush administration are willing to count officially. That's another scandal. They don't even respect the injured soldiers as part of the official casualty if it wasn't in the middle of combat in Iraq. The whole country's a theater of war. And they are distracting huge amounts of tax dollars from the necessities here at home. And they are chilling dissent, undermining our civil liberties, arresting thousands of people without charges, imprisoning them without lawyers, violating our most fundamental constitutional procedures. And what does the Democratic Party do when it took over last November? It took impeachment off the table. Whether it's impeachment, whether it's a demand for their resignation, as Nixon resigned, or whether it's a war crimes trial, these criminals must be brought to justice in America. Fortunately, that is a majority viewpoint in America. 70% of the people want out of Iraq. Hundreds and hundreds of former admirals, generals, colonels, captains, intelligence officials, diplomats who worked under both Republican and Democrat administrations are opposed to this war. They opposed it before. They are opposing it now. Never in American history has there been a war that has been opposed by the established diplomatic, intelligence, and military officials who have retired from the government. It was against the judgment of the U.S. Army in the Pentagon, up to the 4-star level. The U.S. Army was muzzled. The U.S. Army was muzzled. This is a criminal gang that's taking over the White House. And we ought to say it for what it's worth. It's not going to change until every one of us ceases being a spectator and focuses on 535 members of Congress. Always remember, that's the institution that can turn this around, that can make this country great and prosperous and efficient and a beacon for the world. This is the country that can in effect say to the rest of the world, we are no longer going to be imperialistic, we're no longer going to mess around and support dictators who oppress people, and then they get angry at us because we're supporting the dictators who are oppressing and slaughtering these people. This is what we have to do, each and every one of us. Don't worry about what other people may be apathetic or not. You got to focus on 3 members of Congress, and you know them better than I. You got to focus on Senator Stevens and Congressman Young, who are entering their pre-felonious stage in their political career. And remember that word, that pre-felonious stage.